So we're gonna do the weird thing where I probably don't look into the camera the correct way because I'm trying something different today. I was simply too lazy to drag my piece of furniture from where I set it when I work out to here where I film my reviews. So I'm trying to do this on my camera, on my phone, and I don't like when it is vertical. So I decided I would just do it horizontally, but it means I have to look here versus here. And it's gonna throw me off. We'll see what happens. On another note, I sat down and I got so excited because I found this. And I was like, hallelujah, praise the Lord, I've got M&Ms left. No, it's the empty bag I had left over from yesterday, so that was a disappointment. But in any case, today's book is Apples Never Fall by Liane Moriarty. I gotta say, I don't know how I feel about this book. I keep wanting to say I'm ambivalent, but I'm not really ambivalent. I have feelings. I liked the writing. I didn't like the storytelling. I like Liane Moriarty, which is why I liked the writing of the book, because I think she does an excellent job. I just didn't quite understand the point of the book. It opens up with a mystery, and there's sort of two mysteries, but the overarching mystery is what happened to Joy Delaney? Who is Joy Delaney? I'm glad you asked. She is the mother of the Delaney children, the husband of Stan. Both of them were semi-pro tennis players. They brought their children up in tennis. Now their children are grown. They have stopped playing tennis, and Joy and Stan have since sold their tennis school. She's kind of feeling adrift. She's waiting for grandkids. She is just sort of like not liking life. And then it all changes. This girl named Savannah shows up on their doorstep late at night claiming to have been abused by her boyfriend, and she ran away and she said, "Your house looked friendly." So she chose to knock on their door. Then we start to understand that something is fishy with Savannah. We get these two interchanging storylines of the present, in which Joy Delaney has gone missing, and the past of what did life look like for Joy Delaney and her family and Savannah the year prior. I will say the very end of this book, okay, it started slow, and then I thought it dragged on at the end, because the end really, it's this wrap up we don't need. A lot of it is, okay, so spoiler, Joy shows back up. Almost immediately after that is when COVID starts. And we get this long-winded exposition as to what the family's lives look like in those intervening years. And I liked how it wrapped certain things up, but I thought it was wholly unnecessary. Even though I liked that it wrapped things up, I just didn't feel like some of those storylines needed to be here. It was a heavy book in that way. There was a lot going on. It was a fun read, and actually I listened to it. It was a great listen. I really enjoy that narrator. She narrates for Kate Morton, and I believe she narrates for Jojo Moyes as well. Maybe, maybe not. I didn't do my homework because I didn't really plan on talking about that. She made it an entertaining listen, particularly in those moments where I was ready to put the book away. About the story though, Joy goes missing. Nobody knows where she is. Her children have got these cryptic text messages. Her husband looks extremely guilty, and then nobody can find Savannah. Nobody knows where she is. She must be the key. Where is she? Where do I go? Where do I go? Where do I go? I just want to talk about Savannah. Although I feel like I need to talk about Joy because I already spoiled it. Oh my gosh. That's the thing about good writing. When everything weaves together so seamlessly, it's really hard to separate it. The thing with Joy is she was getting kind of tired of life. She was sick of cleaning, sick of cooking, sick of kind of a loveless marriage, sick of almost not being necessary. She felt rejected, in a sense, by her children because she was trying to keep in touch with them, and it was just like, she didn't feel like they reciprocated. So, gloss over certain details. She decides to go on a trip, and because she wasn't wearing her glasses when she typed the messages, that's why they became discombobulated. She had left her husband a note on the fridge, but the magnet was inadequate, and so it fell off. Her note got eaten by their dog, which, if you know me, you know I'm not a dog person. So I was just like, seriously, like, do we have to go there? Do we have to put a dog in here? And then place the blame on the dog because the dog eats paper. I will say though that there's a lot of little details woven throughout the book, so that by the time everything comes to light, you're like, oh my gosh, all of those things were so important and we had no clue. But at the same time, we didn't feel like they were unnecessary. I mean, just for me, I really don't care about dogs, and I just don't really care about when they're in books. So it wasn't unnecessary, but I was just like, oh, really? She goes on this off-grid thing, and it's for 21 days. Nobody knew it. And so literally the day that the police came to arrest Stan, she shows up and they're like, what are you doing? And there we go, problem solved, end of that mystery. It took a long time to get there. It did. But again, I loved the way Moriarty, Moyes, and Morton are three of my very favorite authors because of their storytelling, because of the details, because of the weaving. No, I really, like I was talking about the dog and the paper and all those little things that you don't think are important, but it was so cool how she kind of made you think that Stan did kill his wife. Like, he did act guilty. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence against him, yet in the end, it was all really innocent explanations. On one hand, you could get frustrated and be like, why don't you just open your mouth and talk to the police and tell them you're not guilty, tell them there's a rational explanation, but you know there's no story with a rational explanation. But it was really cool, like the scratches on his face, or the reason that her phone was found under the bed, all those little things. It was really cool the way, in the end, she tied it all together. Aside from that, I think the really strong part of this novel was Savannah. Even though her motivation felt a bit dodgy to me, I thought she had a lot of depth. I enjoyed her character development, even as much as I hated kind of her storyline, which is, as I said, she shows up on the Delaney's doorstep. And at first, Joy is like, do I know her? Do I not know her? Is she one of those friends of my children that like I should know, but I don't? So she's treating her like, oh, hey, yeah, I know you. Welcome to my house. And then it's like, we don't know you? This is where it gets dodgy for me is, I mean, I understand she's sort of doing the empty nester syndrome. When Savannah claims to have been abused by her boyfriend, like beaten up by him and needing a place to stay, and physically wounded, I completely understand Joy welcoming her in, even though she's a stranger, although I probably would have been like, here's $10, go to a hotel. So I understand her welcoming her in for a night. 6 months passed, and she's still living at their house. Granted, she's doing certain things to be helpful, but like, we get a lot of perspectives. We get Joy's perspective, we get a perspective of each of her children, we get perspective of random people, like a taxi driver, the receptionist at a law firm, a waitress at the cafe, and then at the end we get Savannah and we get Stan, and I feel like we get one more perspective. But so there's a lot of perspectives. And I didn't think they were all necessary. But Joy, from what we can tell, never questions Savannah. She never questions who she is, where she's come from, why she's still at their house for 6 months. And it's almost like she wants Savannah there because, one, she has this aversion to cooking. And Savannah is an amazing cook, so she likes that Savannah is there and doing that work for her. But it's almost like because it's empty nester syndrome, she enjoys having somebody around, somebody she can mother, somebody she can take care of. I gotta say, the further into the novel, we got, the less I liked Joy. At first, I loathed the way that her children treated her and considered her. Like, she was inept. But then I kind of got why they thought she was inept, because who lets a stranger into their home, barely asks anything about them, and just lets them hang around for however long? But we get these outside perspectives of her children who are suspicious of this girl in their parents' home. Granted, so at first they're suspicious, and then they're sort of on her side because she tells the story of being abused by her boyfriend. So the two sons are enlisted to go to the old apartment and take her stuff. They do run into the boyfriend, which I thought was a nice little twist, because we are led to believe he's not going to be there. And then all of a sudden he like pops out of bed and is like, what in the world? They intimidate him, take all of her stuff out, and then we're kind of good to go until one of the sons sees a television documentary. The woman on the documentary is telling Savannah's story of being an abused woman, and it's almost verbatim. So now we're like, wait a minute. But the way that Moriarty weaves the tale, you're suspicious, and then it makes sense. And then you're suspicious, and then it makes sense. But in the end, what it comes down to is, we know Savannah's a liar. We know that there are strange things going on with her. Like, one of the daughters tries to come over after her brother tells her about this documentary. She comes over to the house, and it's obvious that Savannah doesn't want to let her in. And for me, I'm like, just like the daughter, I was like, excuse me, who are you to tell me I cannot come into my own parents' house? So that's when I would, sure, go to my parents and be like, look, this is what happened. And then the fact that at least Joy was skeptical and got upset about any kind of aspersions cast on Savannah's character, I had trouble with this part, with this story. But what gave me the most trouble is the revelation. As I said, this is a tennis family. At first, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, why do we care about the tennis thing? It does become heavier subject matter, so then I forgave it. But within this tennis storyline, as I said, the Delaneys had a tennis academy. And they had one rising star, Harry Haddad, or in my head, Haddad. There is this bad blood. Like, Harry Haddad is trying to come back. He had won many a tournament, he had retired, but then he decides, I'm gonna come back for one more show. And everybody's like, oh, this tennis coach of yours is not gonna help you succeed. He does end up failing miserably. But he had started out with the Delaneys, and then for some reason, he and his dad left. And so there's this bad blood, and not only was he a cheater, but it's kind of like he just left without any explanation, which we do find out it was actually Joy who had called the dad and told the dad that in order for Harry to succeed, he needed a different coach. I saw where that came from because Joy was tired of the tennis school taking over their lives and Stan paying more attention to his students than his own children, and she wanted her children to succeed in their tennis careers, which, can I say, her children are Amy as the oldest, and then I think it goes Logan, Troy, Brooke. I got really tired of the whole Brooke has migraines thing. It felt unnecessary. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it came to nothing. I really disliked having entire monologue about Brooke's migraines. I just didn't care. It didn't feel authentic. Anyways, so she quits when she's a teenager because of her migraines. The others quit for various reasons as well. But Joy says, I want their father in the future to be able to look back and say, I spent time with my kids. I invested in my kids. My kids can look into the past and be like, my dad was there for me. Harry leaves, bad blood. Now Harry's trying to make his comeback, and we're sort of seeing little things about that. What we learn is that Harry is actually Savannah's brother. We did not know this before because she'd been lying about her name. Her name was not Savannah What's-It-Face. Her name was Savannah Smith, even though Smith is not his surname. But the parents had divorced, the dad got him, the mom got her. Her mom enrolled her in ballet, and it was this assumption of they were both gonna be superstars. In the process of becoming a famous ballerina, her mom created in her an eating disorder. She would essentially starve her, and it's something that had carried over into present day. However, so there's all these other little details that I'm to tell you about. So just little mentions here and there about all the kids that would just pop into their house because the tennis school started in the Delaney's backyard because they had a tennis court, because this was the house in which the father had grown up. His father had built this court. There we go. Eventually it did move to a larger location, but there were always kids in and out of the house. Turns out these little anecdotes all came back to the same kid, and that was Savannah. And Savannah was so angry, so bitter about Harry, because Harry was the star. Harry was the one that both of her parents wanted, and the way that she felt she was treated when she was inside the Delaney household, that she was gonna get back at them. And on one hand, I think it's brilliant. Like, her eating disorder, and she is so complex. I do enjoy her. It's just this whole eating disorder thing felt a little ludicrous when it came to her revenge, but it was cool the way that the eating disorder played into it, because she was literally starving to death. Nobody knew about it. So of course, if you see some stranger going through your backpack, what are you gonna say except get away from my stuff? Even though all Savannah wanted was the banana in the backpack. She comes in the house, and I don't exactly remember what her interaction with Troy was. Maybe she was in the kitchen or she was doing something. Again, it was food related, and he again chased her out of the house. There was an incident in which Logan had gotten extremely mad when he had played Harry because Harry had cheated. And so then he threw his racket. It ended up hitting Savannah or scaring Savannah or whatever. So that was her interaction with him. I guess Stan hadn't really done anything actively per se, but I guess passively, because he was the coach. That's why there was problems with him. Joy, she did something. Again, it was food related. And then Amy, I guess Amy was the only one who wasn't really at fault for anything. Savannah had asked her to make her a sandwich. I guess she never actually got the sandwich. So I liked the underlying motivation, like how all these little things came together to form the big picture. Savannah is mid to late 20s, and she is holding on a grudge because people wouldn't feed her, because she was breaking into their home and stealing from them. That was problematic for me because it's like the ultimate victim syndrome, in which I don't really care if I was in the wrong. I needed food, nobody knew I needed food, and then you wouldn't let me steal from you. But nobody explained it to me. And then there was another thing that somebody else, because I was like, when is this book going to end? Like, we got to the point where we figured out who Savannah was, and we were almost to the point where we're gonna figure out what happened to Joy, and it just kept going. And so I was like, all right, what's going on? Like, where am I finishing here? And somebody pointed out that there was another problem. Like, Savannah hated Harry as well. And what we didn't know was that their dad had lied to Harry, saying that Savannah had cancer. And so Harry needed to play and win in order to make money to save Savannah's life. He's what, 12, 14 at this point? In the present, he's closing in on 40, and now he's coming out with his memoir, and the memoir is talking about how he recently learned that his sister never had cancer, and his sister, I guess, never died. The fact of the matter is they never spoke. And this other person pointed out how, like, would you really lose touch with your sibling that way? I don't know. It's quite possible, like, if your parents are estranged and there's no communication, nobody's talking to you about your sibling, like, and then you never speak with your sibling, like it's possible you could lose that kind of communication. But after 20 odd years, like wouldn't at some point, 10 years in, 15 years in, you would have checked in on your sibling? Would it have been that much to ask to be like, hey dad, is my sister okay? So I thought it was a little bit dodgy there too. And I completely agree with this guy's point where there are just little things that didn't quite make sense in this book that made it boring, because I did probably 3/4 mark, I started skipping. There was just exposition or dialogue that it was like beating a dead horse. I didn't need the same information over and over. I didn't need examples to drive home the same point over and over. I think what made Savannah so great was her unreliability, her pathological lying, her like deep psychological trauma. She obviously was lying, and there's this one point where it occurred to me, if these kids, if the Delaney children want to know about Savannah, why don't they just go to her boyfriend? If he's the only person that you can think of who knows her, why not go talk to him? Sure, you scared the living bejesus out of him, but go talk to him, explain things, like figure it out. Eventually Logan does, but I don't know. I thought like the children's backstories and personal lives got in the way. They did develop the kids, but I don't know, like all their romantic entanglements, I could have done without. Like they really did not add to the story. They just took up time in the story. And there was one part of the writing that I didn't care for. I thought it was cool at first, and then I completely didn't understand the necessity for it. And that is when we first open, we are getting a third person perspective of these 4 individuals sitting at the coffee shop. She believes that they are siblings, and she has this fascination with siblings because she's an only child. However, there is one of them that she recognizes as a regular. It's all about her. It's like rush time, and they're just sitting there discussing something, and they won't order, and her boss is telling her, get their order, get them in, get them out. She's observing them. And so in a way, it's introducing them. And I thought it was kind of cool because Moriarty did this for the first couple chapters, where we would start with a third-party observer observing the interaction or the behaviors of one of the Delaney children as we are learning that something has happened to Joy. But we never know who that individual is. Like we never know their name. We don't, I mean, there's certain things about them that we do know, but it's like they're incredibly anonymous, and it's really about us observing the Delaney children. But then all of a sudden she just stops, and now she's bouncing between all of the children and Joy, and then the detective, that was the other person. And then we get one random chapter, because there's the detective and then there is her partner. We get one random chapter at the end of the book from her partner's point of view, just like with Stan. And I was just like, why? Like, why now? The very, very end is Savannah. What she is doing is, there had been times when her mother would lock her in her room. She'd lock her in there for hours, days, with little to no food or water. She ends up doing that to her own mother. I think it's a little wishy-washy. I think this occurs after her encounter with the Delaneys, so we don't really know if the mother survives or not. But yeah, Savannah drugs her, locks her in her bedroom, because it actually is a physical external lock, leaves her with a bunch of power bars, and is like, okay, learn to ration, I'll be back later. And then she's on an airplane. She's talking to the guy next to her, and she starts to lie again. She says that her last name is Delaney and her parents were tennis instructors. And so we get the idea that she didn't learn her lesson. I liked that. I liked that she didn't actually learn anything. She is the person that Joy went on this retreat with, which I also thought was strange. I guess we're trying to, or Moriarty is trying to impart the lesson of forgiveness. But I'm sorry, if somebody conned me like that, tried to blackmail my son by accusing my husband of sexual indiscretions, and then was going to try to ruin our lives as a whole, all because we wouldn't feed her or let her steal from us, and then we taught her brother tennis, and then he became the apple of their parents' eyes. Like, I just don't understand where Joy was coming from with that. But that last chapter with Savannah, it's third party. We know it's her because of the details that are given. But I don't understand why it had to be third person narration. I don't understand why she was referred to as the girl, why it couldn't have been from Savannah's perspective. That would have been stronger for me. I don't know if it's supposed to be tying things together, like coming full circle with third person narration, but it didn't work. And it's not a bad book. It was a very intelligently written book, but I don't know how she got away with this. Like, is it because she's proven herself? I mean, it wasn't, the review that I've been reading said that they feared that she would mail this one in, and she didn't. I can tell she put a lot of time and effort, but there were so many holes in the logic and the logical ways that A connected to B connected to C, and why people would actually behave the way they would behave, like why the Delaneys would just bring her into their home without question, why they would let her stay with them for that prolonged period of time, things like that. And but the detective, I thought she was a pretty pointless perspective as well. Everything she learned, we learned from the Delaney children. So it's not like they were holding on to mysteries, and then by having her, she delved into the truth of the matter, and that is how we discover the truth. No, it was kind of like we would get her perspective, and then we would get one of them, and they would reveal in real time what had occurred. So we knew the answer. And then we would skip forward to this detective, and she's like, oh, I've got the answer too. So she did her detective work, but we didn't see her do detective work. And then we had this whole thing about her upcoming nuptials, and then her relationship with her new partner. And I thought it was unnecessary. It just helped to drag the book on. And this one is pretty thick. I don't mind a thick book, but it could have been thinner, and it could have been better if we had gotten rid of certain storylines. Like Troy had been married, and we really get no explanation for this. He cheats on his wife for no reason. Like, he states, I cheated on her for no good reason. Now she's married to a new guy. They can't have children. So she comes to Troy wanting to use the embryos they had fertilized or that they had developed when they had been married so that she could have a child with her new husband, even though this child is Troy's child. And then we get the impression that maybe Troy, he regrets his behaviors and he wants her back. And so now we're getting into the morality of trying to steal a woman from another man. And then we have Amy, who is the oldest, but she, I guess, has mental health issues in a way, or emotional issues. And so she doesn't have steady jobs. She has now gotten into a friends with benefits / sort of relationship with her much younger roommate. The way that everybody's kind of worried about her mental health because of things that she had done in the past when she was like super young. But she's kind of immature and completely unnecessary. And then we have Brooke, who is married, although she's actually separated. We don't actually know why. She had recently opened up her own business. And so it's like, well, was it because of the stress of a new business? And then we get all these one-liners about how people are so glad to see her coming back to herself after he's gone. How she's behaving in ways that she hadn't behaved when he was around. And so you're like, okay, so I guess it wasn't a healthy relationship. So it's not too sad that he's gone, but still, why did he leave? We don't get a straight answer as to why he left, because there were no problems in their marriage until he decided he had enough. And then we have Logan, who is, again, a layabout. He had been in a relationship with this woman named Indira, who, again, out of the blue was like, I'm gonna break up with you. And then we get her perspective. There are other, like, there's some neighbors. There is Troy's ex-mother-in-law. There is just all these random perspectives that don't really add much at all. I don't understand why they're there. But we do get a perspective from Indira where she realizes her problems and the reasonings which she used to break up with Logan weren't because there's actually anything wrong. She just thought she needed a change. And when she did have a change, it showed her that she just needed to change herself. Like, her problems were her own problems, and she couldn't get away from them this way. And so then they do end up getting back together. But I was just like, these personal issues do help to flesh out the Delaney children. But at the same time, they were a whole lot of fluff. They did not add to the story whatsoever. And so that's when I say, how did she get away with this book? I just don't get it. I'm sure there's a lot that I'm leaving out. Have you read anything by Liane Moriarty? Have you read this book? What do you think? What is your favorite book? I think I'm gonna do a book giveaway for this one because I'm not gonna read it again. So if you want this book, let me know. And if enough people say, yeah, let's do a drawing, we'll do a drawing. In any case, I will talk to you later for another review. Bye.